Console, online. HPG connection, online. Educational module, online. All systems, nominal.
Hello, class, and welcome to On the Origin of Battlemechs Podcast, episode 23. Today we are talking about the last half of the Wolverine, so part B of the Wolverine module. I, of course, am your host, Brent Stewart McKee. My co-hosts today are...
I'm Joshua.
And I'm Chandler.
So we are going to pick up right where we left off. We left off with the 7M, and then next up we have the 8K, which came out in 3064 after the Combine Ghost War. House Kurita was in need of equipment. Using the 8K as the base, they inventoried, upgraded, and decommissioned every Wolverine in the Draconis Combine, upgrading what they could and replacing what they could not. Due to this initiative, older models of the Wolverine are basically extinct in the Draconis Combine.
Yeah, this is interesting in our continuing week of Wolverine. This is the first case I think we've seen of mass field refits. Is kind of what it would fall under.
Which, just as a, retconny way to remove an legal issue, is really solid. I think that's, chef's kiss maneuver.
Yeah.
And it also has the advantage in lore of, your normal refits that people think about are done in an ad hoc fashion by a one-off tech, and they might be a genius, but they still aren't a mech engineer and they're flying by the seat of their pants, basically. With these massive nationwide field refits, you've got actual mech engineers, mech designers sitting down and looking at this going, okay, what's the best way for us to bring all these different chassis into a single unified, logistically easy to manage group?
And I think that ultimately they were successful. This guy's real nice. It's got a movement profile of 585. It's got a medium pulse laser in the head, a streak SRM6 in the left torso, a ER medium laser in the right arm, and an ER PPC in the right arm. And it's got 15 double heat sinks to deal with that heat buildup, which is absolutely perfect if you're not jumping and only running.
And then even if you do jump, you just don't fire the ER medium, You've got all those other weapons. Definitely very Kurita with the ER PPC.
Yes.
The only thing that can make this more Kurita if it had an MRM launcher and a C3 system.
We'll probably get there. That's my guess.
Yeah, that'd be my guess too.
It's interesting to note here that ER PPC is such a good buy on a mech. For basically the same tonnage, you get rid of ammo dependency, you maintain your range, and you double your firepower. And because you've got those 10 integral heat sinks on your Battlemechs fusion engine, you don't have to pay too much extra in heat, and you can take double heat sinks because you're a mech rather than a tank. So it's such a good buy here.
It also doesn't have a minimum range. There's just so many good things about the ER PPC.
And it's interesting that they're able to fit in all this extra tech, like the Streak SRM6. If I remember correctly, that weighs a little bit more than a regular SRM6.
I believe it's 1 ton more.
They're able to fit in all that without going into ferrofibrous or endosteel and getting the extra heat sinks.
But they do have an XL fusion engine.
That is true. But also all the last few we covered in the last episode, all the 7s all had XLs.
So it's not really breaking tradition.
Yeah. And this is another one of those, and one reason why I'm a big fan of the Wolverine. This is another one of those fairly rare inner sphere mediums that boasts a short and medium damage profile of 4 in Alpha Strike.
Now, of course, this is also a Project Phoenix, so it has the new art, and this guy definitely has a Kurita-inspired shoulder pad armor going on, and has much more of a sleek, streamlined cockpit, whereas the previous designs, it kind of looked like it was really nested down in there. This is front forward facing right there. So there's these little tweaks in the design. It's also dropped the 360 modular turret we talked about in the episode before, part A.
Yeah, now it's just this little protuberance on the front. Looks almost like a FLIR system on a helicopter. Not quite as pronounced.
It's actually really easy to miss because it is overshadowed by the SRM6 launcher on the shoulder.
Yeah. This is also one of the first metal minis I ever purchased.
Getting all nostalgic.
Yeah, of course, the variant I ran we'll get to it a little bit later in this episode, but...
So it's got a battle value of 1576 and a point value of 38. Next up, we have the 8D. This is a upgrade that adds a advanced targeting computer, and it came out in 3066. This guy has 585 with a 10 with the mask that it is keeping from the traditional Davian line.
Yeah, and this one looks like just a straight upgrade of the 7D with some tweaks here and there. It's got the targeting computer you mentioned, takes the Streak SRM6 that the 8K introduces, along with the ER medium, but puts that in the head instead of the pulse, and then gets a rotary AC2.
Debut.
That's an interesting choice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the damage is potentially greater than that of an Ultra AC5. If you run on rate 6 and you hit and you roll really well on your cluster roll, that's 12 points of damage max versus 10 points of damage max on a Ultra AC5.
Mm-hmm.
That, and you can also unjam.
Yep.
Yeah, being able to clear your weapon is kind of important. And it's also got 10 double heat sinks. So, because it doesn't have that heavy laser-based loadout, it handles it quite nicely.
You are cool assuming you're firing the rotary. You spun it all the way up and you jumped. You are still cool. You're coming out just at 20 heat.
The record sheet has the 2 damage per shot, but not the 1 heat per shot. Threw me off for a sec. Yeah, this is a cool running boy. So it's got a battle value of 1547 and a point value of 34. And it is followed directly by the 9D. And both of these guys share the different armor on the shoulder in their art, which is kind of a almost trying to be a hex grid, with 4 sections.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy was produced also in 3066, and the 9D is a variant of the 8D intended to spot forced fire support, because it puts a tag in for the targeting computer, and it also removes the jump jets.
Yeah, which frees up a lot of weight, because a tag only weighs 1 ton.
Yeah, and then they put that weight into putting 2 medium pulse lasers in the center torso.
Yes. And to help with the heat buildup, they added another 2 double heat sinks, but I think it's still running quite smooth.
Yeah, you'd still be perfectly cool with the normal 10, so not quite sure why they added the extras, but I mean, in certain instances where you're in, hazardous environments, it'll be definitely beneficial.
I would have added armor, but that's me.
I mean, you can't add any more armor. She's full up, boss.
You got to think in real world practicality terms, and you aren't always going to be running in a standard environment. That's got to be something you have to keep in mind. And, with those heat sinks, you can actually light a forest on fire, run this guy through it, and he doesn't really care. And then he can poke his tag laser out of the burning flames and guide in semi-guided missiles while nobody's looking at that direction type deal.
That is a tactic I had not considered.
No one's stupid enough to stand in fire.
Are you calling Natasha Kerensky stupid? She led her whole company through a burning forest.
But did she stand in it?
I guess.
Isn't it said that there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity?
Yeah.
So it's got a battle value of 1369 and a point value of 38. So after that, we jump back to the 8C, which is a interesting design. It came out in 3067, and it has a C3 slave in the head, a medium pulse laser in the center torso, a Streak SRM6 in the right torso, a Streak SRM6 in the left torso, a large pulse laser in the right arm, and a small pulse laser in the right arm. It's got a movement profile of 585, and it has 13 double heat sinks. It's also got endo steel, an XL fusion, and yeah, this is neat. I like it.
The lore on it is that the Draconis Combine had run out of those old mechs to do their field refit to the 8K. And so this was a new production model that was built from the ground up rather than retrofitted from all the different chassis they already had.
Yeah, and you can see that a bit with the fact that it has endo steel as the internals, which would have been pretty hard to retrofit.
It's almost easier to build one new than to rebuild a skeleton like that.
Yeah, but it definitely calls design cues back from the 7K. It's got the same weapon loadout, just with some fancier technology in the SRMs.
Yep, and adds that C3 slave, which is a really great addition for an infighter, which allows an allied mech to give it fire support while it gets in close right where it wants to be.
The Streak SRM6 really signal that it wants to get in nice and close. Now, I am a little confused because I wasn't sure why it was called an 8C, because it has the armor on the arms like the previous Kurita model. So I was like, this looks like a Kurita model. The weapon system loadout looks like a Kurita model. Why is it called the 8C?
Because it's got C3.
That makes sense.
There's a lot of Kurita models that ditch the K for the C when it's a refit for a C3.
Or a common design they already have?
Yeah.
Okay. See, even I am learning about the nomenclature.
We're getting into the era where things are going to start changing up because you are going to get things like this C3, you get C variants, stuff like that. It's no longer as straightforward as it was in the pre-Catalyst era.
Them good old days?
Maybe.
Them Harmony Gold days.
So it's got a battle value of 1447 and a point value of 39. And it is followed by the 9M, which is actually not a registered design with any company, but is actually a category or catch-all for the models that have been upgraded possibly multiple times to bring their capabilities up to the standard. This is a design/grouping that originated in the Duchy, Alias, Roslet, Merrick's Freedom Fighters. It is produced, air quotes, using mobile refit installations in specifically modified dropships. First recorded in 3073. Since then, Callahan Industries has started to produce its own copy of the 9M using its production facilities on Thermopolis, which is, a pretty cool origin story.
Yeah, it's not a bad mech, and I think this is the first one we've seen with a heavy PPC. And so it's got that in the right arm. It's got the Streak SRM6 in the left torso. Who would have thought? And then it's got an ER medium laser in the head, and it's got 15 double heat sinks. So it sinks all of that plus jumping pretty nicely. It has an extra heat to fling around at whatever it needs to sink. Say someone gets up close with a flamer, or someone, I don't know, shoots it with an extra laser pointer.
Or a plasma rifle.
Yeah.
It's definitely fits the traditional Wolverine format of one quote-unquote large gun and then SRM6 and a medium laser. But by going to that heavy PPC, it really doubles down on the damage.
Yeah, 15 damage to a single location will do something.
Usually.
Even if it's against a Atlas, that something might not be, destroy the mech, but it'll get his attention.
Yep.
Strip all the armor off a torso is something.
Yeah.
You're only 5 points away from knocking them over at that point.
Exactly. All in all, a good mech.
Yeah, this is an interesting kind of the whole field refit thing we were talking about, except this time, it was done kind of ad hoc by a coalition of designers who worked together to find an optimal format and then propagate that.
And that makes sense with it being a Jihad era mech, a lot of extra national screw the Word of Blake sentiments.
Yeah, I mean, during that era, the Free World League was just a mess, so having a mobile facility is not a bad idea at all.
Mess is an understatement. These was bad times.
If they were English, they would call it the Troubles.
Yeah. You're getting there.
So it's got a battle value of 1617 and a point value of 34.
And that brings us back to Kurita with the 9K in 3074.
Good old Kurita. Sticks with the 585 movement. It still has maximum armor. It does switch up the game with the engine. Instead of having the 275 XL that most of the mechs have had, we are now at the 275 Light. So getting some more durability there.
And Brent, do you see what I see?
Are you talking about the C3 Slave or the B-Pods?
I'm talking about the snub-nose PPC.
Another contender would be the Sword that's right below it.
Or the TSM. And the compact gyro.
Yeah, this thing has all the bells and whistles.
Yes, but I was talking about that beautiful, beautiful snub PPC.
It's got a movement profile of 585, but when it's got that TSM active, it's got 6'9".
Which is nothing to sneeze at.
No.
That's something you'd expect to see on a clan medium or a 45 ton medium mech.
Not a 55 tonner.
Those don't usually go 6'9".
Yeah. So to condense everything that it does have weaponry wise, it does have the snub nose PPC in the right arm. It's got 3 light machine guns in that right arm as well, linked up in a machine gun array. It's got anti-battle armor pods, which are for discouraging those pesky battle armors from trying to get you out of your mech. And one of those is in the left torso, and it's got one in the right torso. And then of course it's got your SRM4 in the left torso.
Which is the first time we've seen the SRM get downgraded.
Yeah, which, I mean, seeing as you got that snub nose and the TSM and the sword, I'm not surprised. And you went down to the light, lost some capacity there.
So it drops some heat sinks, going down to 10, which makes sense since it's got that triple strength. You know, you need to have that heat up to make that work, which is why I'm a little sad to see it not have more weapons that generate heat.
I mean, if I was designing this, I probably wouldn't use the battle armor pods, but at the same time, the games I play, I tend to not have a lot of battle armor flinging around. So real world, those are great because that keeps you safe from the very scary men in suits.
If anything, I'd swap out the machine guns for something that generates heat.
Bunch of small lasers.
You can always, both in the fluff or in the lore, and on the tabletop, you can turn off your heat sinks so that you can build that heat.
It's true.
If I remember correctly, in Alpha Strike, you just declare at the end of a turn that you're going up to 1 heat. It is so.
Yeah, it's not quite as streamlined in Classic, but it's not entirely hard to do. I found the trick is just remembering to turn them back on.
Yeah, it's the same thing with extra steps, because you just go, hey, I'm turning off this many heat sinks at the end of this round, and then you recalculate how much heat you can sink.
Obviously, the 9K comes stock from the factory with that amount of heat sinks turned off.
So I say, are samurai allowed to use heat sinks?
I would assume so. I mean, they like those PPCs, right?
It's true. So this guy also has a sword, and I think this is the first time we've had a actual melee weapon, and so it does 7 damage, which is of course modified if you have that TSM going.
Yes, and I believe it rolls on the punch table, which is important.
So it could try to cave your head in, and then, while it's caving your head in, it can distribute targeting information to its buddies with its C3 slave. So it's caving your head in, and you're getting hit by LRMs. Fun!
Good times were had by all.
Yes.
Good times were in fact not had by all.
Cue Davian crying in the corner.
So this guy was actually produced by Sapphire Metals, and they tested the marketability of this model by selling it to the mercenary market, and it was so successful that Sapphire licensed Victory Industries, who had established an infrastructure that they could use to produce the 9Ks for the RAF and the DCMS.
For those who don't know, RAF in this situation is not Royal Air Force, it's Republic Armed Forces, speaking of the Republic of the Sphere, and DCMS, of course, is Draconis Combine Mustard Soldiery.
Yes.
Mustard.
I'm sure many of them relish the opportunity to serve. So it's got a battle value of 1420 and a point value of 33.
Then, after that, you get the Wolverine 9W. W for Word of Blake this time, not Wolf, as in with some mechs in the past.
And we have been very clear, do not mix that up, people.
They do not like it. That you get into bar fights. You get into deadly bar fights if you say that. Maybe.
Yeah.
Probably.
So it's really too bad that this is a Word of Blake design because it has different art than the previous models and it looks so good in my opinion. It really just kind of beefs it up a little bit, you know, just put that character creator slider from normal to chunky and it looks good.
Well, don't be sad, Brent, because we're going to talk about the 9W2 next, which uses the same art.
Fantastic.
The 9W drops back down to 12 double heat sinks, has standard internals, light ferrofibrous armor, and still knocks that amount down to 169 points instead of the maximum 185 we've been seeing with most of the other Wolverines. Has an XL engine again, and then also has the movement of 587, which is very different from the 585 we've been seeing.
Improved jump jets.
Now with extra whoosh.
This is a really good mech. Unfortunately, it is Word of Blake, so you've got that improved C3, and it can be hard to justify why you're running it. If it was the foundation for the 9W2, which we'll talk about next, and 7 jump jets, I mean, I think everybody already knows if they've been listening to our episodes, I like jumping 7. It is one of the most broken mechanics in the game.
It is mathematically auspicious.
Yeah, because when you jump, you gain a +3 to your own shooting. It makes it harder for you to shoot. But when you jump 7, you've moved 7 hexes, which is a +3 to the enemy's shooting. And then on top of that, you jumped, so you could add another 1 to yourself. You're handing out a +4 targeting penalty to your opponent while only taking a +3 to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're ignoring terrain. Like, jumping is inherently semi-broken, if not completely broken in Battletech. And you're just so much better with this jump 7. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can really just jump right in close and hand out that C3 data to your compatriots. So it's got a ER medium laser in the head, a improved C3 CPU in the right torso, 2 light PPCs in the right arm, which you can see in the art, just looking so good, and 1 MML5 in the left arm with Artemis 4. So that is it's a nice loadout. It also has light ferrofibrous and case 2.
Good old case 2, also known as I don't want to blow up all of my mech.
Got 12 double heat sinks, so it should be able to handle that heat very easily.
And I think this is the first one we've seen in a while that does not have a SRM in the left torso.
It kind of got moved into the left arm with the MML5.
It's still a missile launcher system. It's just a better missile launcher system than the classic SRM.
Yeah, but it's not in the left torso.
I mean, it kind of is. If you look at the art, it's in the shoulder.
It still has it. It's still on the left side.
Okay.
But now you can actually shoot backwards with it because you can torso twist and then turn your arm.
There you go.
Now with Rock'em Sock'em action.
Yeah. So it's got a battle value of 1404 and a point value of 39. And that brings us to the last model today, the 9W2, which we have already mentioned. And it was produced by Luthien Armor Works after they grabbed the license at the end of the Jihad when Vicor Industries was carved up and stripped for parts. It was first seen in 3084. This model was happily accepted and integrated into the rest of the DCMS, whose warriors felt it complemented the Panther, Charger, and Dragon already in service. The majority of these units first produced were allocated to the units supporting Devlin Stone's military action against the Word of Blake. So it's got a movement profile of 587. It's got a ER medium laser in the head, a C3 slave in the right torso, a Guardian ECM suit in the right torso. It keeps that 2 light PPCs in the right arm. It has a small laser in the left arm and a MML5 in the left arm with Artemis 4 still. It also has 12 double heat sinks, and it has the XL fusion and keeps the light ferro.
It should also be noted that this wasn't an original factory design. It was originally a refit, and then it proved so popular that they made sure they had the license for it and started producing it as a new model mech.
Something to notice is that it downgrades the case from case 2 just a standard case, and since it's an inner sphere mech, you can only put it in the torsos. So you got case in the left torso to keep MML ammo, which is still in the left arm, from causing your entire mech to go kablooey.
Yeah, I think some of that has to do with the fact that case 2 was still experimental at the time. It was a Word of Blake thing still. So dropping it down to that standard case allowed them to produce something that the rest of the inner sphere could use. This 9W2, though, is probably one of, if not my absolute favorite battle mech of them all. It was the first one that I used for my own main character in a campaign. And its ability to jump 7, get within 3 or 4 hexes. You generally don't want to be 3 if you're shooting your target, but if you can jump within 3 of something and then shoot something else that's in short range for your light PPCs, that's what you do. And you just hand out C3 targeting to everybody and you can't be hit. And it's so much fun.
Just really using that C3 slave as a spotter, just getting in close for someone else to take down beside you while you pick off someone a little further down.
And I would say that this is probably the best C3 spotter that I have found, because it's got that Guardian ECM to protect its outgoing data. It's got the 7 jump, so it's really hard to hit. It's a medium mech with a decent amount of armor, so it's not going to die real fast like a light. Yeah, it's a great, like I said, possibly the best C3 spotter in classic Battletech.
Nice.
And for anyone wondering why you would do 2 light PPCs instead of 1 standard PPC or 1 ER PPC, light PPCs are 3 tons each. Standard and ER PPCs are 7 tons. So you get the same damage output, but for 1 ton less. And the main cost you're paying is you have to make 2 attack rolls and 2 location rolls. So your 10 points of damage isn't all going into the same spot.
You also lose a little bit of range.
Not over a standard PPC.
Right, but against an ER or something.
Correct.
Like that. So it's got a battle value of 1480 and a point value of 40. So now that we've discussed and seen every single one of the Wolverines, what do we think of it overall? I think it's a great design. It's, beefy, but it has a presence. It definitely has that survivability that it's known for that really makes it noteworthy and a threat. It's great.
I think I already said it's one of my absolute favorites, maybe my top mech of Battletech.
Yeah, I feel it definitely fits its role as a medium command mech extremely well. And it also fits in the other roles, as needed just as well.
Well, hopefully it'll get a lot more time in the spotlight now that the legal issues are in the past.
Yes.
We can only hope. I'm really looking forward to a future Ill-Clan recognition guide that gives us some new cutting-edge post-3150 versions. Maybe make my heart glad and swap those 2 light PPCs on that 9W2 for a snub. Just make it...
Yep. So now we are going on to pilot profiles. And our first pilot today is Simone Ward. And she comes from a family whose tradition is in the military, dating back over 2,000 years. She is a graduate of the Coventry Military Academy, class of 3012. She requested and was granted a liaison position with the Kellhounds. Shortly after beginning her assignment, she began a relationship with Morgan Kell, the commander of the unit. I mean, it's the Battletech universe. That's not super out of place, After Morgan retired for the first time, she and Daniel Allard and Patrick Kell held the unit together, but was under strength at a single battalion. After Patrick's death and Morgan's return, Simone and Morgan restarted their relationship, resulting in them having 2 children, Phelan and Caitlin Kell. She served with the Kellhounds at the Battle of Luthien. She died in the explosion on Tharkad that was intended to and did kill Melissa Steiner, and of course the assassin that carried out that action is known as the Dancing Joker.
Not very funny.
No.
I mean, he thinks he's hilarious.
He's one bad dude. So I'm digging all the way back to the original TRO 3025 for Mech Warrior Lib Argust. Lib Argust was a Capellan pilot. It's part of Norman's Recon Lance in Dinsdale's battalion, 4th Tau Ceti Rangers. She is known for being an excellent athlete, and I don't know if we have heard of it anywhere else, but she plays a game unique to Battletech apparently called Rudder Bat.
I am unfamiliar.
I have no idea. I've never heard of it before. She also plays the much more common or familiar basketball, and she's a first-rate recon pilot due to her competitive nature and her never-say-die attitude. It's kind of a lackluster entry for such a great mech.
Mm-hmm.
But, hey, Rudder Bat.
I wonder if you can play it in a mech.
I wonder if it has to be played in a mech.
Taking an actual rudder and using it as a bat, obviously.
Well, we've already talked about them playing chess with mechs, so...
Anything's par for the course.
Yep.
No, that's golf.
Mech golf.
So next up we have Humpet Man Lisa Morgan, and Lisa serves in the LCAF in the 11th Larian Guard in command of the Recon Company during the fighting on Kimball 2 in 2932. She was pushed to her limit with the scouting and raids. When she was ambushed on a night mission, she rallied her troops to escape the trap and was mostly successful. Her Wolverine was crippled, and the commander of the Karita 10th Rasselhag Regulars, who was piloting a Battlemaster, came in for a final blow, or coup de grace. In an act of desperation, she fired her missiles and had a lucky hit to the cockpit, killing the commander of the opposing forces. This act broke the 10th and sent them into disorder, and the 11th and Lisa made use of this time to collect themselves and escape. Lisa was awarded the downed assault mech to replace her Wolverine.
It's a bit of an upgrade.
Or downgrade, depending on
how you look at it.
Yeah.
I think it's model specific.
Next up, we got Roger Callahan. We're going all the way at Clan Space today, folks. Roger Callahan, he is a founding member of Clan Wolverine, and he participated in Operation Klondike while piloting a Wolverine 2, so the Royal variant from last episode. And that's about all we know about him.
Well, he is a founding member of Clan Wolverine, so unfortunately most of that knowledge was lost when they had their Trial of Annihilation, and by have their Trial of Annihilation, we mean all the other clans just curb stomped them.
Yeah, because Nicholas Kerensky's a crazy, clinically insane madman who wanted to create a boogeyman to unify the rest of the clans.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Clan Widowmaker didn't, stir it up to begin with.
Yeah. They definitely were a problem. And next we come to Lawrence Helmond Nelson, also known as the 12th Vegan Ranger. Lawrence was the sole survivor of an ambush set up by a traitor, resulting in young Lawrence being the heir to the Duchy of Verd. Fearing for his life, and rightfully so, he disappeared into the massive conscripts of the AFFS during the First Succession War. The only known keepsake from his former life is a weathered and expensive and rare autographed copy of The 11 Against the Stars by John A. Loran. He internalized the romanticism of the book's narrative and the code of ethics that the Rangers championed while protecting the colony of Vega. He took Loran's V sigil as his own and inadvertently started to form the 12th Vegan Rangers, a mercenary unit. The 12th Vegan Rangers moved up and down the Kurita-Davian border defending against pirates and incursions. After the conclusion of the First Succession War, Lawrence had a battalion of seasoned warriors under his command. As fate would have it, the Rangers were given cadet duty on Verdir, employed by the same people who killed his family. Soon after arriving, Nelson's identity was exposed, an attempt was made and failed very badly, and of course after that he brought the offenders to justice and reestablished his family holdings.
Where have we heard that story before?
I think I've heard it once or twice.
History repeats.
At the very least, history rhymes. So, our final notable pilot for today is Chuza Eliza Malawarchai. Of the few individuals to escape Fortress Darien in 3070, Eliza is remembered for her running battle in the rocky canyons and the forests of Darien. Her co-pilot of the stolen Wolverine was none other than Hohiro Kurita, heir to the Combine at the time. She was able to get him to the pickup coordinates as the escort fell around her. After Hero was handed off, she turned around to face the word of Blake, spending her own life's coin to ensure the heirs escape in security. When the Combine returned to Darien in 3081, Hero, now coordinator, would plant a rare Yoshino cherry tree on the ground she fell on, making the area a monument to the sacrifice she and the others made. Now, that's a poetic story.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely how you build a cultural mythology.
You see that tree? People died at that tree.
So our data dive for today is on autocannons, and taking the lead on that is none other than Chandler. As is known, he loves the AC-20, so it is fitting.
Autocannons, man. You can't go wrong with them. They're the best.
For some reason, when Chandler said autocannons right there, I was just picturing him doing the aliens thing.
Little do you realize I was. Autocannons. Okay, so autocannons, they are developed from the early Terran tank rifles from the Age of War. We would call them today like our modern main battle tank guns. The first one was the AC-5 in 2240. Followed by the AC-2 in 2290 and the AC-10 in 2243. The AC-10's a little weird because the prototype kind of got out with the Mackie, but it's a bit fuzzy. It's a bit long ago, a couple years.
Those records are lost to time.
Well, and it should point out that we actually have autocannons today.
Yeah.
So it's not a new technology. It's just the scale that Battletech does it on is...
Yeah. So like with our main battle tank guns now, they're like, that's not an autocannon. And we're like, but autocannons are supposed to be smaller than that, right? Right? And then, of course, after the AC-10, you get to the creme de la creme, the AC-20 in 2490. Took them about 200 years to get from the AC-5 to the AC-20. Don't know how it takes them to figure out just fire 4 more bullets.
Well, they go bigger.
It's complicated. Yeah, it's a lot more complicated. Most of them fire heap shells, which are high explosive armor piercing, but there's also instances of designs that fire discarding sabot rounds or caseless rounds. Caseless rounds are not very common just because it's hard to source them in the field, and also they have had issues with the feed mechanism and the guns exploding, which I don't need to tell you, not good for your mech.
Well, I think one reason for that is when you're firing a burst of rounds, you're generating a lot of heat, which is something we see in the rules. Yeah. And in the traditional, at least brass case, they're probably not actually brass cased the way we would think of a rifle round, but a similar concept, that casing absorbs heat. And so when you eject that out, you're ejecting some of the waste heat out with it. So
when you've got caseless, there is no extra heat eject.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also nothing to protect the powder from the heat.
Yeah, there's less of a barrier.
Yeah. Battletech autocannons tend to range from 30 millimeters with the smaller end all the way up to 203 millimeters. And then they also can fire in bursts of shells or single shots depending on the model and no matter the damage size. Although they do tend to fire in bursts, especially at the higher ends. It's a bit weird to find like AC-20s that are like like one shot. It's usually a very high rate of fire burst of shells to get that 20 damage output.
Yeah, mechanically it's treated as a single shot, but in the lore it is a burst that stays so close together it doesn't wander.
Yeah.
That's one great way to explain some of the range discrepancy between real world and Battletech rules. If you're treating that range as its effective clustering to where they're all landing close enough to get that 20 points of damage, that makes a lot more sense, because the further out those rounds and that burst travel, the further they're going to spread out and spread the damage across the torso.
Just like a shotgun.
Yeah.
Which would actually be a cool mechanic if you could fire an AC-20 beyond its standard range and then treat it like, I don't know, a Rack 5.
That would be nice.
I think the rules are crunchy enough already.
Yeah. Okay. So within the Battletech autocannons, you got a bunch of different flavors. You got your regular flavor, so that's kind of like your vanilla, pretty simple. You got light autocannons, which are essentially just a cut down version of a regular autocannon. They trade some range for weight savings and space savings. You have ultra autocannons, which we did touch on today, which are essentially double tap autocannons, but they have a chance to jam. And the only way you can unjam them is with unofficial rules currently. And the reason for that is in the fluff, the round itself, it jams into the firing mechanism and fuses with the walls. So you literally can't get it out without like taking a freaking welder to it or something.
Yeah, someone's got to get in there with an angle grinder.
Yeah, and that you ain't doing that in the field.
No.
Not unless you want that person to get like killed. And then you've got rotary autocannons, which take the idea of multiple shots to the next level and can go up to 6 shots. And they also can jam, but you can unjam them in the field, which is a key upgrade from the ultra autocannon. However, they're only available in AC2 and AC5 flavors. So you're trading fire rate for reliability, essentially.
Yeah, and the light autocannons are also only available in AC2 and AC5.
Yes. And then you got your LBX, which are very similar to the regular autocannon, but instead of having access to specialty ammo like regular and light autocannons do, you have the choice of either a solid shot or you have cluster. And cluster, you fire a single pellet for each pip of damage a round would normally do. So like an AC2 fires 2 cluster, and AC20 fires 20 of them. And each one of those is its own cluster, so they don't group in 5s like LRM would. It's all individual damages. So it's a pain in the roll, but they will eviscerate a open mech.
And they give you a good chance for getting that golden BB, as they call it, to punch through, which is a rule I disagree with. I don't think cluster munitions should get through armor criticals.
And then you've also got Proto-Mec autocannons, which I'll talk a bit more about later. And then we also have high velocity autocannons, which I'll touch on later as well. They're a bit weirder. They're a bit of the outliers of the autocannon family, especially the high velocities, since they are pretty much a abandoned technology at this point. But we'll talk more about that when we get to them.
And then real quick, clans technically do not have access to standard autocannons or light autocannons. They have rotary autocannons, which were experimental at the last tech point we got.
Supposedly they are widely available as a 3145.
Clan rotaries?
Yeah, supposedly. Whether that means they'll get dropped down to like standard tech or advanced tech, who knows? But according to the fluff, they are now able to be found around. You don't have to be in some weird, governmental black site to find them now.
I'm sure spare parts are easier to find now, which will make every tech happy.
Oh, yeah.
Which is probably the plan going forward into the ill clan. Just replace rotaries with the clan version. Like pretty much everything else is going to get replaced.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting with the clan ones. They're not quite as space efficient as Inner Sphere ones are, which is weird because normally clan weapons are more space efficient and more tonnage efficient than Inner Sphere. But they trade that space for range because they pretty much keep normal range bands for the autocannon size that they are. But we'll get into that when I touch on those. So starting off with the AC2, you've got the standard AC2, which does 2 damage. Who would have thought? Generates 1 heat. Your ranges for the Inner Sphere version are 4 for your minimum range, and you've got 8 for the edge of your long range, 9 to 16 for your medium range, and then you got 17 to 24 for long. Ammo per ton is 45, and they are 6 tons in weight, and they take 1 mech slot. So 1 critical slot for that one gun. And so that's a lot of tons to put into that one slot. And then the clans don't have a version of the standard AC2, so we will keep moving on with the regular ACs. And then you get the AC5, which again is only 1 heat to fire, but this time you're getting 5 damage, so more than twice the damage. Minimum range is down to 3, but then you're also losing some of your effective range by going from 8 to 6 for the edge of your short range, and then you got 7 to 12 for medium, and then 13 to 18 for long. And then you're also going up in weight to 8 tons, so you got a gain of 2 tons. And then you're also gaining 3 critical slots, so it's a bit bigger, but you're also getting a bit more damage. And this is kind of the baseline, main tank gun in Battletech. So past this, we're going to start getting into some, much more scary weaponry game-wise. AC10, it does 3 heat instead of 1 heat, so definitely jump up there. Doing twice the damage of the AC5 at 10. Getting rid of minimum range, and your range bands are 0 to 5 for short, 6 to 10 for medium, and 11 to 15 for long. You only get 10 shots per ton now instead of the 20, so you're definitely starting to lose your shots per ton, which makes sense because your shells are going to be larger, and the gun also weighs 12 tons, so you're also gaining 4 tons to get that extra 5 damage off of it, and also is 7 crit spaces instead of 4. So definitely starting to get up there in size, but none of that compares to the AC20, which is the biggest boy on the block, with a whopping 7 heat for an autocannon, which in laser terms is just 1 below a large laser. So then you're also getting up to 20 damage, so this thing will reliably put holes in pretty much anything you hit. You'll rip off the legs and arms of anything smaller than a heavy usually.
With that, you can punch through one side of a locust and go right out the other.
Yeah, not much is going to stop this gun. However, that trade is range and weight, so your range bands are 0 to 3 for short, 4 to 6 for medium, and 7 to 9 for long. So you are not really reaching out at all. This is I'm going to be in your face and I'm going to shoot you in the face and you're going to die gun. This is I'm going to beat you up.
Mm-hmm.
So ammo per ton, you got 5 shots per ton. Weight, this thing weighs 14 tons. This is getting up there. And then also takes 10 critical slots. So you tend to not see this gun until you get into like heavies or assaults. Although you do have your one-off mediums like the Hunchback or the Blitzkrieg that are focused around a AC-20 analog.
Or built around it.
Yeah.
Because a Hunchback isn't a Hunchback without an AC-20.
Yeah. The Hunchback with an AC-20 is a very boring laser bow.
Yeah, the 6-pack of lasers on that model is just, it doesn't feel right.
It's funny, and it's technically more damage, but it's not as cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that being the base set of autocannons, like Joshua said, these are not available to the clans. In Clan Tech, they did away with these during the Golden Era and replaced them with the Ultras, essentially.
Which is why Chandler's not a clanner.
Yep, but luckily they have LBs still, and those are my baby. So they earned the reprieve for now. And so with the bases out of the way, I'm not going to go over all the nitty-gritty stats of all the LBs and lights and rotaries, just because that's a lot of numbers to throw at you guys.
And I also might make you edit this episode if you do.
Yeah, and I don't think he'd be very happy with me. Okay, so we're going to dive into the LBs with the extra different versions. So the LB2 is developed in 3058 by the Fed Sons for the Inner Sphere, and then Clan is in 2826 by Clan Goliath Scorpion, which is not a name you hear around very often anymore.
No, they have not done anything particularly noteworthy for a while because they were absorbed, if I'm remembering correctly.
They were kicked out of Clan space, essentially. They are now the Scorpio Imperium.
We are seeking more information on them.
I see what you did there, because they have seekers.
Yeah.
And then you got the UAC2, which is the Ultra version, developed in 3057 by the Free Worlds League off of Clan Tech, which was developed in 2827 by Clan Goliath Scorpion.
Well, and wasn't the Ultra... Oh, it's the Ultra AC2, because the Ultra AC5 was developed by the Star League and then became Lost Tech during the Succession Wars.
Yep. Then you got the Rack 2, 3062 for the Fed Sons for the Inner Sphere, and then Clans. It's a prototype by Clan Diamond Shark in 3073, and supposedly common technology by 3145, but we will see whether that gets put into actual rules. And then finally for the AC2s, you got the Light AC2, which is developed in 3068 by the Federated Sons, and there's not a clan equivalent because the clans do not care. They don't like that.
Clans like to go big.
Yeah.
What is really the purpose of the Light autocannons.
So really the purpose of the light autocannon is to allow the usage of specialty ammo a lot more easily. So essentially a lot of the mechs that take light autocannons, they trade that extra tonnage that they gain and they just put more ammo types. So they're taking more ammo and they're taking all the fancy ammo like precision ammo, which makes it easier to hit someone. It negates their TMM to an extent, or armor piercing. So you're trying to get those nice through armor crits, maybe blow them up or maybe hit their engine or do something nasty that they don't like. Or you're specializing in anti-infantry, anti-air, you name it, there's probably a specialty ammo for it.
If you really got to reach out and touch someone.
AC2s in general are a bit weird, a little underpowered, but at the same time, as long as you're not shooting them at something bigger than like a light mech, they'll give you good service. And they'll also reach out and touch someone.
That's under classic Battletech. HBS rebalanced the damage because autocannons, especially the 2 and 5, are kind of underwhelming.
Yeah.
Well, HBS also has a completely different game system.
Yeah.
Sort of.
To an extent.
There are parallels. It's on the hex grid, but you're not locked into one of 6 positions. Movement becomes negated when you're fired at. Like, there's a lot of little things that change that really make it a different flavor of turn-based combat.
Well, but the damage is pretty much identical for all other weapons. It's only the autocannons that got a significant rebalance.
That's true.
So moving on to the AC5, the slightly larger brother of the family. You got the RLB-5X, developed in 3058 by the Fed Sons. Again, they love their autocannons. And then for the clans, you got 2825 with Clan Coyote doing it. So while they're developing Omni-Mech technology, they're also looking at guns and saying, we need to make this a little bit better. And then you've got the UAC5, the granddaddy of the Ultra Autocannon program, developed in 2640 by the Terran Hegemony, and then reintroduced in 3035 by the Federated Commonwealth. Interesting fact, the UAC5 was originally developed for the Sentinel Battlemech, which was produced by Defiance Industries, and we will get there not too long, actually. It's not that far down the road. And then the clan version is developed in 2825 by Clan Mongoose, which is another name you don't hear around very often because they also got absorbed, I believe.
I think so, yes.
It's so hard to tell the difference sometimes between absorbed and annihilated. And then you get into your Rack 5, which is the largest of the rotary autocannon systems. And it's developed in 3062 by, you guessed it, the Fed Sons for the Inner Sphere. And for the clans, yet again, you have the Clan Diamond Shark in 3069 developing a prototype, and then supposedly widely available in 3145. And then largest of the light autocannon family with the light autocannon 5 developed in 3058 by the Federated Sons. All in all, a very useful section of the autocannon family, but not at all the deadliest, but definitely will give you good use and is a good utility weapon.
Which is why you see them pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, if you don't know what kind of autocannon to throw on something and it's not a assault mech, autocannon 5's not a bad choice. Might not be the best choice, but it's not bad.
Yeah, it's reliable, 5 points of damage or 8
And it
points.
can reach out.
Yep.
I mean, you're going all the way out to 18 usually. So it can reach out and touch someone if it needs to. All right. So moving on to the AC-10s. First off, we got the LB-10X, and it was developed in 2590 by the Terran Hegemony, and then reintroduced to the Inner Sphere in 3035 by the Federated Commonwealth for the Inner Sphere flavor. And then the clan version was developed in 2828 by Clan Wolf. So Clan Wolf getting in, muscling in on the gun market there. The Ultra Autocannon 10 was developed in 3057 for the Inner Sphere by the Free Worlds League. But this one, interestingly enough, is explicitly stated to be a reverse engineer of Clan Ultra Autocannon technology. And speaking of Clan, the Clan tech version is developed in 2825 by Clan Diamond Shark. So they've got a bit of a history with autocannons, to be sure, like Clan Goliath Scorpion. And there is no rotary autocannon version for the Autocannon 10 or light autocannon version for the Autocannon 10.
Or 20.
Yes. And then moving on to the big boy, the 20, you got your LB20. It's developed in 3058 by, actually, I couldn't get a developer for the LB20X. So I'm going to guess it is a reverse engineer of the clan version by someone. Who that someone is, I don't know. Maybe it's the Lyrans, but who knows? And then the clan version is developed in 2826 by Clan Househorse. And then you got your Ultra AC20, which developed in 3060 for the Inner Sphere version by the Lyran Commonwealth. And that is why I think they might have developed the LB20 version for the Inner Sphere. And then you've got the clan version in 2825 by Clan Steel Viper. So you're getting a little bit of the outlier names into the weapon development process with autocannons in the clans, which is nice because a lot of these smaller clans kind of get pushed off to the edges.
Yeah.
When you get like Clan Wolf and Jade Falcon and the big boys on the block.
Well, and it makes sense in a certain aspect because they're the smaller ones, so they're probably not on the cutting edge of the science fiction type weaponry like the ERPPC.
Yeah, or the large laser, or the pulse laser, or, insert energy weapon here.
But hey, we already have Inner Sphere AC-20s and the concept for the LBX and the Ultra, so let's take our slightly lower tech level and build something that we can actually use,
Yeah, let's tune her up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so now we're going to get into those two outliers of the autocannon family, the Proto-Mec autocannon and the high-velocity autocannon. Starting with the high-velocity autocannon, developed in the Capellan Confederation, it comes in AC2, AC5, and AC10 versions. There is no AC20 version, and that makes sense seeing as the purpose was to try to develop a longer-ranged autocannon. So the way they did that was they made a specialized shell and made a gun to go with that shell that used extra powder and was a bit larger. In the end, it did meet its goal of getting a longer ranged shot out, but shortly after the development cycle did finish in the Capella Confederation, Gauss rifles started to get reintroduced in the Inner Sphere, and so there wasn't really a purpose to the high velocity autocannon anymore because that role was filled by the Gauss rifle.
So it was a kind of abandoned technology.
Yeah, very much an abandoned technology, which is weird because most of the technology in BattleTech is lost, not abandoned. But
don't HVACs have a problem with exploding as well?
Yes, so they can explode if the shell goes into the loading mechanism not quite right. And so that's probably another reason why development halted at a certain point. But it's unclear whether that would have gotten worked out eventually, especially since with the development essentially ceasing with the reintroduction of Gauss rifles. It's something that might have gone worked out eventually, but
it's an interesting what if.
Yeah, it's a what if. Like for those people who like playing like 3025, high velocity autocannons are one of those guns that, assuming the Inner Sphere never returned to Star League era tech, probably would have eventually became a thing. Just because fluff wise, these countries need a way to project firepower out past these ranges in a non-missile format or a non-laser format.
It would be interesting to see how their militaries greeted them, because in World War II, the U.S. military, or the Army specifically, did not want the high velocity 76 or even the 90 because they weren't dealing with enemy tanks as much. They wanted the high explosive capabilities of the lower velocity 75 and 105 howitzer. So I'd be curious to see, would these HVACs have a similar issue where they aren't as effective against infantry and other kind of soft targets as a traditional autocannon, and would see pushback against their introduction?
I feel maybe for the high velocity 2 and 5, but for the high velocity 10, I feel like that's a dedicated anti-mech or heavy tank gun. Like if you're shooting that at an infantryman, it's not because you're like, this is my primary anti-infantry gun. This is because I just need him dead, whether or not this is a PPC, a high velocity AC-10, or, a flight of LRM-20. I just need him dead. So it definitely is a weird branch cut off in the autocannon family. And speaking of another branch, there is the Proto-Mec autocannon family, which is a offshoot of the clan technological leaps forward during the Golden Age. Originally, they are part of the attempts to miniaturize autocannon technology to make it lighter and easier to put into mechs, because autocannons have a tendency to be big and bulky and heavy, which is a problem, especially if you can look at a ERPPC for the clans and go, well, this does more damage and is lighter, and I can easily put this onto my mech. But autocannons are a bit more reliable. You can send them out anywhere practically, and they'll keep ticking. And so they tried to miniaturize it, got shelved because of the ultra autocannon programs succeeding so well. However, in 3070s, Clan Bloodspirit picked them up again due to the Proto-Mec projects, and they wanted a autocannon into that family. And so picking up the technology from the earlier clan discoveries in autocannon miniaturization, and also potentially firsthand experience with the Inner Sphere light autocannon, they developed the Proto-Mec Autocannon 2, Autocannon 4, and Autocannon 8. It is noticeable that they do deviate from the 5 and 10 to the 4 and 8. These are primarily designed to be Proto-Mec guns, not Battlemech guns. And so Proto-Mechs are like a weird in-between of a Battlemech and battle armor. And I'm sure we'll touch on them one day, but that is well down the road because they are a thing that popped out of nowhere during the Jihad and then kind of went back into the shadows.
Yeah, they're very strange and have a very interesting rule set, loopholes or exceptions.
However, the clans, never putting anything to waste, as is their lifestyle, decided to try to slap these bad boys on battle mechs, which they easily did. And so you will see medium mechs and light mechs with prototype autocannons occasionally. The main one I can think of off the top of my head is the Grendel, not the Omni-Mech one, but the standard battle mech Grendel for the Ghost Bear Dominion. It has a version with the Proto-Mech Autocannon 8 instead of a Autocannon 5.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely trains some range for firepower, but it's another offshoot. We might see it develop further in the future, or it'll just kind of die out with Proto-Mechs. We shall see.
Time will tell.
Time will always tell. And that is the end of the autocannon family tree. It is wide, it is explosive, and it is lovely, and it is my favorite.
So, Chandler, is that really the end, though? Because I'm pretty sure there are battle armor that have LBX autocannons and bear hunter autocannons.
This is true. So bear hunter autocannons are essentially, let's try to put a giant heavy machine gun into a battle armor. And they did it because the clans are crazy and they figure out how to do anything they want to do. They have very short range, but they will rip apart infantry. And that is their purpose, and that is what they do. And they do it well. I'm not sure if they're quite a actual autocannon per se, just because of how small they are. And I don't think they fit within the 30 to 203 millimeter kind of family tree that the Battletech autocannons tend to sit in. But they definitely have the word autocannon in the name, so you're not wrong.
I know there's the LBX autocannon on the Thunderbird battle armor.
Yes, the Thunderbird has it, and there's a couple other clan battle armor that have LB5s. No, they have LB4s, essentially, because one point of clan elementals with their LB guns is essentially an LB20. So each one has an LB4. Effectively, relatively, it's about a medium range, probably comparable to an 8. It's not comparable quite to any of the other autocannons, and I don't have it pulled up right now, but it is definitely one of the longer range weapons you can put on a battle armor, which is always a good thing. And they will scare the pants off of any battle mech once they get hit by once, because it's not something you expect from battle armor. You know, you walk up and you're like, oh, it's battle armor, I'll get hit by lasers or missiles or something, and all of a sudden you get hit by 20 pellets out of nowhere, and you're like, oh,
that happened.
It's one of those like, oh, I have to respect you. Okay.
Yeah, you have to respect them, and they're fast, and they'll get you.
It almost sounds like, because they're basically an LBX4, almost sounds like they're a derivative of the Proto-Mech line of autocannons.
Yeah, and that's definitely possible. I think they were originally developed by Clan Novacat, and I don't think they ever really had any interaction with the Proto-Mech program, but I would not be surprised if there's some sort of family tree sharing in there.
Cross-pollination is always possible.
Yes, and I mean, they're autocannons. There's gunpowder, and it goes boom. Therefore, you follow the tree back far enough, they will be related.
Yeah. Our sources for today are Sarna, Battletech Battlemech Manual, Master Unit List, Primitives Volume 5, 3085 Unabridged, 3085 Project Phoenix, TRO and record sheets of Succession Wars, and Operation Klondike, and Battlecorp.
And then also the Tactical Operations Manual and the Tech Manual for Battletech.
And then my notable pilot was out of the original TRO 3025.
We are supported by our Patreons at patreon.com/on the Origin of Battlemechs. Our social media on Twitter is at Origin of Mechs. We also have a dedicated channel on the Everything Battletech Discord. Feel free to stop by and say hi. If you have any questions, requests for topics, or wish to contact us, our email is ontheoriginofbattlemechs@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, I encourage you to let your friends know about us and to leave a review. Special thanks to my friend Laura for the intro and outro. Class dismissed. Everybody have a great day.
Peace out, Mech Warriors.
Stay safe out there.
Module complete. System standby. Would you like to load the next module?
You okay?
Needed some of that water you were talking about.